Good morning and welcome to another live edition of Wealth Building Wednesday. Wealth Building Wednesday is brought to you by TRHT Selma. TRHT stands for Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation, and it is always a delight to join you every single Wednesday morning, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, and connect you, listen, help you reach out to folks that you might not necessarily know or have a connection to. But our guest today, a lot of you all, especially if you are from the Black Belt, you may actually have a connection to this superstar, this international consultant, honey. Listen, this morning on our broadcast of Wealth Building Wednesday, we are excited to have a homegrown expert who has done so much in the field of education. And we're going to talk about not just education, but we're going to talk about getting to the why. Right. She's a woman of God. She has extraordinary faith, and she stepped out on faith years ago, launched her own business, and is now, like I said, I wasn't playing. She is an international consultant. Like, she has contracts around the world. So if you want to know how to scale your business, how to tap into that why, this is the episode for you. So I am pleased to welcome Mrs. Krystal Hardy Allen. Welcome to Wealth Building Wednesday.
Thank you so much, Lydia. You are such a sweetheart, and I appreciate your introduction. And I'm just so glad and grateful to be here with y'all today.
Absolutely. You are no stranger to the program. And so we are excited to have you here with us because you have done something very, very special since we last saw you live with us. And we will talk to you about that. But we want to first just kind of talk about your business, right? You founded your business, K. Allen Consulting, only 6 years ago.
Yes.
And as I indicated, I'm not playing. Like, you have contracts all around the world.
Yeah.
So now, why did you start your company, and what do you think has really caused you or caused what some may think as instant success, because 6 years is really not a long time. But help the people understand that it has not been instant. It was not a fly by night.
It wasn't given whatsoever. I really started my education at the time consulting firm, which has since morphed and transformed into being an education and management consulting firm, really for two reasons. One, because I wanted to expand my impact. At the time, I had been a school teacher and a school principal, and of course, impacting a specific school community, right? So those students who were students there, as well as their families, and working with the particular staff, that we got to work with. And to be honest with you, I led a lot of progressive, what would be considered culturally responsive practices as a Black woman in educational leadership, and doing it at a time where it wasn't trendy to do so. It was unpopular to do so. And it wasn't something that was truly just embraced in what was an at-will employment context as a school principal, which means that our terms of employment is that you could be terminated or let go at the drop of a whim based on not being the right fit for that job, not based on any due process, a performance improvement plan being in place. And then there were no unions or collective bargaining to really protect educators and employees. And so the progressive leadership practices that I led were met with opposition and resistance. I was written up for things as simple as bringing my children to the Bridge Crossing Jubilee in my hometown there of Selma, Alabama, and really being coded for having specific staff feel uncomfortable or feel discomfort because I was having open conversations with children about race. And I think and reflect on that all the time, because my ability to then start a consulting firm came as a result of being let go or unjustly terminated for leading practices that I now get paid to do today, right? And so it's just crazy how things come full circle, right?
Yes.
The second thing that, was the impetus to me founding this consulting firm, which has been really, successful over time. And as the young people say, an endeavor in which I got it out of the mud for real. earning every opportunity and contract. And the second reason was because I wanted to create a space for healing for myself,
Okay.
mentally and emotionally, as a Black woman, thinking about forms of harm or oppression that I had experienced based on my identity as Black or as a woman, or based on colorism, or based on me coming from the socioeconomic or financial background that I come from. And, I said, what if I create my own table instead of asking for a seat at someone else's? And so this business was an endeavor to reimagine what work, but work with psychological safety, work
Yes.
with emotional safety, work with feeling appreciated, valued, seen, and heard could be for me. And once I knew that I wanted to build a team, it was my opportunity to say, how do I reimagine what work feels like for my own team? Right. So this past month of September, a story went viral and was picked up by Essence and also CNN of me gifting our entire staff.
Beyonce.
See, yeah, Beyonce, right? And so, like, that's one tiny example of stuff that's ongoing for our team,
Mhm.
where I have really just said, what are the worst conditions in which I've worked? And how do I exercise the agency to create one of the best work experiences that other people have, so they never have to experience what I went through as an employee?
What I hear you saying in this moment when you talk about, especially with your team, right, is not only did you consider your experiences and what you didn't want, you
Mhm.
readily identified what you did want, right,
Yes.
or what you do want
Yeah.
out of yourself and out of your firm, what you want as a work experience for your team, what
Yes.
you want, because I've been in workshops with you before. I've sat under your tutelage, and I'm always in awe at how you're able to connect the dots for folks, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so when I think about your consulting firm, and the fact that a lot of us, especially during COVID, became consultants, right?
Yeah.
This is the age of information,
Yeah.
and so if you have information that you can share with people to monetize that is a great thing.
Yes.
What sets your consulting firm apart from all of the other education and management consulting firms that are
Yeah.
out
That's such a great question, because I think every business owner should be hyper aware of what would be considered their unique
there?
value proposition, or what makes you special and dynamic as a vendor, or entrepreneur, of any type. One thing that sets KL and consulting apart is the multicultural composition of our team. We are African American, we are Latino, we are Asian American, we are white, we are Middle Eastern, and more. And that is from both our salaried full time employee staff team and our contractor network. And I think in the current day and age that we work with, it is an added advantage to have so many different types of lived experiences
Mm,
around the table, and multicultural in terms of other forms of identity. So I have staff members that identify across the gender spectrum, that identify with different sexuality or sexual orientation backgrounds, that come from different socioeconomic backgrounds, religious, like literally is really diverse. And I think that is special and powerful. I think a second thing is that we customize everything we do to meet our clients where they are. So nothing is cookie cutter and repeat from another client. And so the ability to deeply and actively listen to the needs of a client, and really say, based on what we hear and what we analyze in the data, here's the solution, or here are pathways of alternatives that we would like you to try, is very custom to the fact that they are a Detroit school, or they are an Atlanta nonprofit, or they are a New Mexican government agency, right? And so there are nuances around people's culture, their norms, their traditions, their values, whether
mhm,
they are paper-based people, whether they're digital, the different ages and
mhm,
generational diversity. Like, we take all these things into account to say, here's how we're going to meet you where you are. And I think that then sets us apart when people want a more personalized approach to whatever work that they're doing. Last thing I would say that I think really sets us apart is our commitment to inclusion, diversity and equity, not just because it's trendy, but because this is work we were doing way prior to the racial awakening connected to George Floyd's unfortunate murder. You know,
Mhm.
it is the work that is embedded in every service, not just an explicit anti-racism training or a diversity, equity, and inclusion service that someone buys. Anything that they invest in, we don't see inclusion, justice, equity, diversity, all those things as an add-on,
Mhm.
as the foundation by which all the work should be happening anyway.
Absolutely. And so I'm grateful to hear those three things: the fact that your team is diverse, right? Because how can you teach other people the importance of diversity when your
Mhm.
team, if your team was homogenous, right?
Yeah,
Um,
and it's possible, right? But I think for me, it models my ability also as a Black woman to walk out what I advise other people to do.
yes. And that's so important, right? This word integrity oftentimes gets cast by the wayside. I'm not going to say oftentimes, sometimes gets cast by the wayside. But to share in the vision that you are helping other people to craft is a beautiful thing. And to customize what you're doing,
Yeah,
because what works for the schools in Selma or what works for a business in Detroit
right.
is not necessarily going to be the same pattern that
Yeah,
needs to be used in Los Angeles or in Santa Fe. So,
that's right. That's right. That's right.
yeah.
And I think from like a symbolism standpoint, right?
Mhm.
I think that there is unlearning across racial lines that people
Yes.
have to do when they think about what power looks like, what possibility looks like, etc. Because I think there is something that is pretty dynamic around seeing a person of color, but then going underneath that, seeing a Black person, and then underneath that, a Black woman have a team of people that are not their race that resign from their positions to come work for you. Because
Yeah.
we don't also see that all the time. We see um, Black folks who work for white folks. We see Asian American folks who might work for Latino folks. But I think there's something to be said about having a Black owner and leader have people across racial groups attract and say, I'm coming to work for a Black woman.
Yes.
That I think is powerful, that I think the world needs to see even more of,
Mhm.
so they know that that too is possible and should be normalized.
Absolutely. And so when I think about the fact, right, during your intro, I talked about the fact that you're from the Black Belt. You're not just from the Black Belt, you're from Selma. You're Sardis is actually where you grew up. And
Yeah.
so you find your roots in a space that has not always experienced diversity. In fact, diversity many times is pushed away, right?
Yeah.
Even when it comes to Black folks and white folks, and how we nurture relationships or have experience, like we experience a lack of relationship with
Yes.
one another. And
Yes.
so I wanted to find out from you, because of where you're from,
Mhm.
how has that shaped, or has it in fact
Oh,
shaped your work?
big time. It shapes everything, Lydia. Um, One, my ability to maintain radical hope in the midst of wild circumstances of resistance
Wow.
comes from being born and raised in Selma,
Wow.
because I always go back to the tremendous work and time and diverse efforts that had to go forth for us to experience the social movement that was the civil rights movement, right?
Mhm.
And I think about not the romanticized version of history that we tell and teach, but I think about the accurate version that encompass everyday folks doing stuff well before King, for instance, even stepped on the scene. I
Right.
think about people who were transporting folks at night in their vehicles. I think about all the meals that were cooked. I think about the people who were coordinating mass meetings. I think about all of the activity
Yeah.
that caused change. And I think about how many setbacks
Mhm.
the community had, and elders and advocates and activists experienced. And in the midst of all of that, they still thoughts. So for me, it has informed a level of my professional resilience because anything that has ever happened to me professionally, I don't allow it to count me out. I don't settle for it as defeat. I keep going to actualize a dream, right? I think with our clients, the same thing is true. We hit roadblocks. We even hit roadblocks that come from political legislation that is passed that impacts the type of work that we do, and we
Mhm.
still keep going. We're always strategic. We never give up. And for me, as the business owner, that very much so is connected to me seeing lived examples of hope and possibility in the midst of fire, right? That
Yeah.
lets me know I too can do a thing. You just got to keep going, right? I think a second way that being raised in Selma has tremendously gifted me is that I, at a very young age, had a very sophisticated racial and historical literacy
Mm-hmm.
because I was born in Selma.
Mm-hmm.
I could spot forms of racism quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I could spot what was a microaggression, even if I didn't have the language to call it a microaggression.
Right.
Identify that was unjust,
Mm-hmm.
and I need to say something about it and do something about it and act. I think that my ability to identify injustice is completely to the credit of being born and raised in Selma. I think my ability to be unafraid to speak truth to power is completely because I'm from Selma. And I think that my ability to see my racial heritage and not only as pain and struggle, but in its joy and achievement is
Mm-hmm.
because of what I was taught as a Black child growing up in Selma, Alabama.
I want to I'm prayerful that those folks who are listening or watching are able to tap into what you just said in
Mm,
a way that empowers and engages them. Let me say ignites the power within, because I don't know that we really, as individuals, have the power to empower other people, right?
mm,
But rather, we have to ignite the power within each other. And
yeah,
so, by you sharing those things about your hometown, right,
mhm,
that Selma often gets um, a bad rap, right? And a lot of it comes from us and how we can get on social media, we can be in each other's
mhm,
presence, and we can say some of the most horrible things
right.
about this wonderful city that folks from all over the world recognize,
Yeah,
right? And but the ironic thing is that we expect greatness when we speak death over our city, right? But the fact
of
that you
course.
have shared with us
Yeah,
the catalyst that being from Selma has been, and in a world where you're literally, I remember when you started your company, diversity, equity, include DEI was not a thing. I mean, it was a
yeah,
little thing, but it
yeah,
was not a thing like it is
yeah,
now. Like it is a total
right,
thing.
right,
And
right.
so to hear that, I hope that it inspires someone who may think that, gosh, I'm living in Selma. I want to start this business. I know that I
Right.
can make a mark on the world with this consulting firm, with this restaurant, with this food truck, right, with this
Yeah,
beverage line. Whatever it is, don't think that Selma holds you back. Selma can actually
mhm,
be the pedestal on which you
mhm,
stand. And so I am so grateful
right.
to you for sharing that.
Yeah,
What about diversity, right? Because this is a word, diversity, equity, inclusion. Diversity has gained a lot of influence, if you will,
yeah,
in the
yeah,
vocabulary of schools and businesses. Schools, not so much in the South. We have a ways to go. We've got to be creative in how we teach the accurate history
mhm,
due to some laws that are being
yeah,
put into place in states like Alabama and Florida. But
right.
why is diversity actually important when it comes to schools and business? Like, what difference does diversity make?
Yeah. So number one, our students, their families, and even us as adults, right, who may be um, parents, well, not just parents, but like practitioners in the work, like educators, leaders, policymakers, etc. We are diverse beings.
Mm-hmm.
We are literally not a monolith.
Right.
The students that are being served in schools represent so many different identities. Even when they are racially homogenous as a
Mm-hmm.
campus, within that sameness of their race, there's still difference. You have children who may be the same race or color sitting in a school community, and yet they come from different financial backgrounds, or they have different mental health statuses.
Yes.
They have different exceptionalities, special needs, and sometimes neurodiversity,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they might have different linguistic, like backgrounds. There's
Mm-hmm.
just so much that is that makes them similar, but also makes them different. I mean, different. And I think that when schools embrace the concept of diversity, however it plays out in programming, curriculum, initiatives, or whatever, what they're really saying is we acknowledge two things. We
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge the common thread of what our children have in common, literally, but we also acknowledge that our children are different. And because they're different, that means that they will have different needs. That means we understand that one size does not fit all for
Right.
everything we do for children. So to embrace diversity is actually to embrace a winning, a more effective approach to reaching every child, because you're reaching them where they are and for who they are,
Mm.
right?
Reaching them where they are and for who they are. It's
Mm-hmm.
a winning strategy, y'all, because everybody wants to win. So if you want to win, that's a whole nother conversation.
It is. It really is. And I also think that, like, the reality is that the world is ever evolving, always. Change is inevitable. And an embrace of diversity is also saying yes to keeping up with the times,
Yes.
recognizing that a 14-year-old today needs something different than a 14-year-old in 1993, needed
Yes.
something different than a 14-year-old in 1973.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know? So it's
Absolutely.
about being maximally aligned to deliver an education that really will be impactful and set children up for the world that they're about to go out into.
And so now I want to go back though to this idea of the winning strategy, right? Seeing young people for who they are
Yeah,
and for what they are, right?
yeah,
How helping them to show up in the very best way that they
yeah,
possibly can, and helping each other, right? Because when we help other people, it in fact really does feed us. It should
yes,
feed our soul.
yeah,
So when I think about what as a child it felt like to not necessarily be included, right?
yeah,
Being a nerd, right? Like, oh, you don't go out, you don't party, these type of things.
right,
As an adult
right.
experiencing that, right? um what difference does it make though, especially when we think about the educational arena, right? When people
Yeah.
don't feel included, whether it's the staff or the students,
Mm-hmm.
what tends to happen? What do we see happening in educational, whether it's the institution like a school itself or even within districts, when people are pushed aside because of their differences or the lack of diversity?
Yeah, yeah. So for one, it impacts their mental and emotional well-being.
Mm,
Because when we don't differentiate and embrace diversity, what we're really doing is rejecting
mhm,
aspects of who our students are. And therefore, that means we're neglecting specific needs that they have to be able to be set up to thrive as students in a school, right?
mhm.
So, our ability to, for instance, um, you know, tailor our pronunciation of a child's name to
Yes.
learn how to speak it properly and not give them the name you want to have helps them develop a healthy state that they belong here. And the way that they were born and who they are actually matters. They are someone important, right? When we take the time to pronounce other students' names properly, it makes them feel like they deserve to be in that space and they're
Mhm.
normal. And when we don't put forth the effort for other students, It's sending off the opposite message that they don't belong, that something is wrong with me, right? That then really helps children develop a sense of imposter syndrome, a sense of negative self esteem or self confidence, where they're questioning, whether or not they are good enough as is. And so schools can contribute to the development of a healthy esteem by embracing diversity, but they can also, contribute to anxiety, stress, and other like really detrimental mental and emotional states when they don't create an environment where every child feels seen, valued, heard, and appreciated, right? And so
Mhm.
that's one thing for folks to be mindful of. I would say a second piece for them to be mindful of um,
Mhm.
is the way that not differentiating what you teach, how you teach it, um, means that you're not attuned to the learning needs of certain children, which
Mhm.
then impacts their ability to retain the information you're putting in front of them. And if my retention is off, that means I can't apply accurate knowledge to an assessment. That means I don't test well. That means that I don't put forward results or outcomes that are even academically satisfactory, right? So
Mhm.
we see academic achievement in schools being impacted by the implementation of diversity programming, of inclusion initiatives, of equity as a focus. We also see that children just flourish and thrive when they have the specific supports and interventions necessary for them to do so. So when I say embrace diversity, part of it is embracing the diversity of the learning styles that are sitting right in front of you, right? That the
Mhm.
more you begin to, for instance, be an auditory teacher and rely heavily just on like deep listening, you don't use visual aids, you don't do any of this stuff, you're really attuning to kids in that classroom who learn the exact same way.
Right.
Not beneficial for students who have different learning needs, which
Mhm.
means that when we see their performance, whether it's on a quiz, a test, etc., be really low, right? We then
Mhm.
have to be able at some point to own, yes, we are educating children, but we're not truly educating them in a way that's effective because we're not delivering information in a way they can truly receive it, right?
Right.
And so that's
Mhm.
something, those are two things that I would say that like the detriment of not embracing this is that you stand the chance of impacting student growth and student achievement academically. And that's the whole most important premise of schools is to equip students with the knowledge, skills, tools they need to become, incredible leaders and productive citizens, right? I think a
Mhm.
second detriment to not implementing the work is the ability to, um, you know, further disparities with youth and mental health and
Mhm.
youth and emotional well-being. So schools that embrace it show more positive outcomes of creating environments where students do not feel that the school environment alone is the impetus for the chronic stress that they're dealing with, or for the anxiety that they're dealing with, or for the depression that they're dealing with.
So when I'm hearing the impact that the lack of embracing diversity, right? When
Mhm.
we choose to exclude people,
Mhm.
I literally was thinking as you were speaking, I'm like, Lord, I wonder what the data would show if we looked at education systems and the poverty that exists in community, right? Because when you have one thing is like let's be clear.
Mhm.
Historically, like even in the city of Selma, right? And I know that we are 30 minutes in, and so we're gonna get out of here in just a second. But recognizing that when we were living I know my mom, right? My mom and my uncle were growing up in a segregated school system,
Mm-hmm.
right? The schools that were considered black schools, didn't have the best materials, didn't have,
Right.
what we would consider state of the art, right? And
Right.
so I think about the impact, though, that those teachers had on the
Yep.
lives and
Mm-hmm.
the
Overall.
productivity
Yep.
that those grown folks
Yep.
created throughout their lifetimes.
Yep.
And now I think about now and how we have access to all of these resources, all
Yes.
of these tools.
Yep.
What in the world are we doing when we're not embracing people where they are, right? Encouraging and instructing people and how they learn. Even as a business owner, the importance of being able to share your business plan, not just on paper, but to speak it, right? To have charts and graphs connected to it, because all of those things help folks to translate. But the long-term impact that can have on children when
Mm.
we don't look at diversity and accept diversity as a key to success, but rather use it as a weight to pull, to
Mm-hmm.
hold people back.
Yeah.
And let's consider how poverty, is even created as a result of people feeling hopeless. Like you said, the
Yeah.
mental health issues that young people who grow up to be adults, y'all, right? That could literally be the parents that don't want to come into the school, or come into the school with an attitude because the last time they were actually in a school, they
Yeah.
were pushed aside and said you aren't right,
That's
or
right.
this, or everything about you is wrong, or something about you is
Mhm.
wrong.
It's wrong. That's right. That's
Wow.
so. All of this is so interconnected.
Yeah. Yeah,
All.
absolutely. Absolutely. So now I do, as we begin to wrap up, want to share with folks. I got to get up from my desk though,
Ha
because
ha.
it's sitting right here. I'm like, dang it! If I was like on Bewitched, I would just twinkle my nose, right?
And Lydia, when I tell you, as you begin to dive into it,
Mm-hmm.
I know the way that you think and the things that you value, you are going to love the guiding questions in it
Mm-hmm.
and the other aspects of how it helps us reflect and to audit practices within the educational system.
Yes. And community in general, right?
Oh,
Because I'm
yes.
not an educator, right? But I mean,
Mhm.
I'm an educator to my son and to
Yeah.
other
But
folks. But
community work,
yeah,
nonprofit, all
yeah,
kinds. Yes.
yeah.
So
And
applicable.
so what she's talking about is this amazing book. If you don't already have it, go get it. What Goes Unspoken. Krystal, Mrs. Allen wrote this book. It is now available for purchase.
Yeah.
I pre-ordered mine, honey, from Amazon. So
Thank
it's
you.
already sticky notes and highlights in here.
So much to hear.
Yes.
Oh, that means so much to
Yeah,
me from
yeah,
you.
absolutely. And that's why I say, because, but from the community lens, right? Because
Yeah.
even though you created this book, go get it, right?
That's a number
Um,
one release and a number 4 bestseller in the country.
yes, come
Yes.
on, Sam.
Yes. They're like, come on, Selma. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So even though the content is specifically directed to educators, there is such a role for community members in general. So whether you are the leader of your church missionary society, or
Yeah.
if you are the Sunday school teacher, if you are a grandparent who is looking for a way to better include all of your family for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Okay, there are tips in here. There are thought processes in here that
Yeah.
will challenge us.
Yeah.
But challenging is a good thing, because if we go through life, y'all, if we keep the same ideas,
Yeah.
um, 1803, people who look like you and me would not be live and having a conversation.
Yeah.
We couldn't hold up a book.
Literally.
Right, literally,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we've got to be able to challenge our thought process.
Mm-hmm.
and challenge how we do things and choose to do things differently.
Yeah.
And so, in that vein, as we begin to wrap up, I wanted to ask you if you had to start all over again, right? And
Mm-hmm.
start in Selma,
Yeah.
what would you do differently? What would you do the same and what would you do differently?
Um, the same would be, and you mean like as a young person?
If you were starting your consulting firm, like if you had it to do all over again and you were starting from the black belt, you were starting your business all over again. It can be 2023, but if you had to start it all over again
Mm-hmm.
here in what sometimes we are experiencing like a digital divide where we are not necessarily as attuned to what's inside the book, right? um how would you, or what would you do that would be the same as what you did when you started 6 years ago, and
Mm-hmm.
what would you choose to do differently if you were starting in a rural community like Selma?
Yep. So one, I was still focused on the education system as a target audience. Because that was my first focus when I started the consulting, agency. And so I was still focused on K-12 education. Something I would do differently though,
Mhm.
is really, which is such a good question. I think what I would do differently has more to do with my internal state of being. It was
Okay.
about a particular business practice. And that for me would be to not, you know, second guess and
Mhm.
question and doubt the gifts that I brought to the table. I think in a lot of ways I've experienced success, and in some ways, it took me longer to get to certain mindsets internally because of all the hurdles I needed to jump over. Of one, getting past the need for external validation as a
Mhm.
professional, and just knowing that like your work when it is really good will speak for itself. I later on got to that place of aha, but it
Mhm.
took me a good 2-3 years in business to realize like you don't have to do all that. This person doesn't have to support it or appreciate it or whatever, but the work is going to do what it's designed to do, and you are going to land um, what is yours because the work is good. Even if you get one rejection, you're going to get these other open doors. Like that is something that I would push myself to not play small
Okay.
and to not operate from a place of like fear and doubt,
Mhm.
um, as much as I did in the beginning. Like there's some things I was confident about again, but there were other things that I questioned, that I think then impacted my ability to show up big and bold and confident,
Mhm.
um, that I don't deal with now.
Okay.
Like now I have different questions that I'm answering and that I toggle with, but I'm never questioning, can I do it? I'm never
Mm.
questioning, was that really meant for me?
Mhm.
Questions centered in like imposter syndrome. I'm never questioning, um, you know, whether or not I can keep up the success
Yes.
because I see the success as a fluke. I know X is producing Y. I know how to get it and know how to keep going after it
Yeah.
to replicate success and grow. And now, you know, scale
Yeah.
because we're at a point of, scaling. And so that's a beautiful thing, but it's something I would definitely do differently is the inner work.
Okay. I'm excited to hear you say that. We've of all of the guests that we've had this season, everybody has alluded to the importance of doing the internal work,
Mm-hmm.
the mindset shift that has to occur, not moving out of fear, but moving from a space of confidence and knowing who you are, what
Yeah.
you bring to the table, even if you're building the table, right? And whose you are, right? So, whatever your faith is,
Yeah.
knowing that you will move to the next level and receive what is truly set aside,
Yeah.
just for you.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you
Yeah.
for being here with us
Yeah.
on Wealth Building Wednesday. I want to thank you for being such an inspirational person.
Thank you.
Um, Girl.
I appreciate you so much. And I appreciate everyone that I know is going to be listening to this and watching this. And y'all get me authentic. Every time I refuse to change that. What I would change is the fact that I have on no makeup. Y'all get raw. They get the raw, Lydia. They get the raw.
And still just as beautiful, honey. You don't need that stuff at all. At
I
all.
need my foundation, baby. And everything else is concealer, you know? But I appreciate you so much. And I just love this platform. And I know it is imparting wisdom to those that consume it, including myself. The things that I watch from Wealth Building Wednesday are so impactful to help me just audit, to say like, "Ooh, that's good. That's affirmative for something you do." But then the other part is like, "Ooh, that's a gap. You haven't even thought about that, or you're not even doing that yet." And so it's good for growing.
Well, that's the goal, for us to learn, share, and grow together. And again, I truly appreciate your time. I know that you are on the road constantly. And so for you to take this time out to share with us from your wealth of expert knowledge, I want to encourage again everyone to go out and get this book. Even though it is speaking to educators, this
Mm-hmm.
is going to educate you regardless of what walk of life you
Yeah,
are in.
parents,
Mhm.
anybody,
Yes,
anybody
absolutely.
who is looking to reimagine this work of
Yes,
equity diversity is a book for you.
it is. Absolutely. Can't think of a better way to end this show other than to say again, thank you. I
Thank you.
appreciate you and just want to encourage everyone out there until next Wednesday, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. Get your behind out there with all these notes from this show and start building your wealth.
Come on, build your wealth, baby. Build your
Yeah,
wealth. Thank you, Lydia, so much for this opportunity.
absolutely.